journalists thought. It's not what Edward R. Murrow thought. Now, people think that's true, but it's not true. He was attacked by the McCarthyism, the sort of the patently wrong McCarthyism movement. Okay, he was backed into a corner as a journalist, and he was forced to articulate in a way that clearly people knew he believed. Okay, he was still being a journalist. He is just because of the political situation, the truth had been pushed over into one corner, and he was fighting for it. Over in his corner. It was a very divisive. You guys ever studied McCarthy era? It's a difficult era of our times. A lot was wrong. So he became a celebrity for his own beliefs, but it's not the same context as we have nowadays, where oh gosh, he was I'm just thinking of Rachel Maddow. Bill O'Reilly.
Glenn Beck.
Huh?
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Okay, and it's just not. I mean, Glenn Beck is Glenn Beck, and and Glenn Beck says he's a journalist, and he has journalists working for him. But Glenn Beck himself is a publication, is an agenda publication. So to call it journalism, we're just, I would argue we're past the golden age of journalism, where there was this desire for the major media outlets, the mainstream media, who now is sort of considered halfway between dinosaur and owned by the liberals. They actually had a much different reputation from 1950 to 1980. They actually served the planet quite well. I would have been proud to be a member of the New York Times for much of when I aspired to be a journalist in my teens and my early 20s, I aspired to be a New York Times style reporter. Okay, it sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? In the context that we talk about the New York Times nowadays. But that would have been that would have been working for the Shalom of the City for me, at the time. So, but things have changed because it's like I said, pre-Watergate, post-Watergate. It's sort of the whole celebrity journalist. The explosion of I'm a journalist because I publish, the editor-reporter relationship, all of these things are, I actually honestly believe, like I said, I wanted to be a pastor. God said no. He's got me back into teaching. I honestly believe that just like my antique rock and roll guitar playing, my Crosby, Stills and Nash guitar playing is coming back around to be popular. My antique journalism is coming back around to be popular. So, and I believe that God's kind of called me to try to instill this into the next generation. You kind of get past what you see and get back to this. Get back to this.
I have a question.
Sure.
How to balance the media management, and journalism?
How to balance media management?
Yeah, and journalism, especially when you do some investigative reporting, you need lots of time and lots of money. And also journalism needs dignity and independent, but also we also need money. So how to balance this relation?
Oh, well, I would walk you back to the reporter-editor relationship. That's I hope I'm getting across that this is reporting. Period. Okay, this is how you report. This is how you should view every nugget that you get. What Catherine was, we would do that with this story. We have a reporter-editor relation, answer all the questions, and then we would have a resource discussion. Okay, which you're saying. Well, how do you? But that's what editors only. The most expensive thing that they can spend is time. They've got a news hole they've got to fill, whatever their publication. Okay, they have got only a certain amount of resources to fill that news hole. To take a reporter off that and put him on something for a longer period of time, to manage their resources differently, what would be the criteria? It has to be huge. It has to be a game-changing. It has to be a save the planet kind of, issue. It's very interesting that the New York Times, today's New York Times, pulled an investigative team off of you know, pulled an investigative team together and went to work on the Tea Party. That tells you something about what they think about the Tea Party. They needed to get to the bottom of what the Tea Party, is it really racist? Is it really, they needed, it was absolutely changed the planet for them. Very expensive to pull a reporter off, you know, whatever news hole that the publication, managing media management, to pull him off the, you know, I mean, what would it take for whoever manages resources at the Christian Post and say to Lillian, I don't want you to do anything else but this until we get this done? What would that say that they thought about whatever this was? It'd say that you know, it was the most important thing they were doing, right? So that's, you know, when we talk about investigative reporting, it really comes back to this thing. You're relieved of all your responsibilities because you finally found the source of all sources, and you got to get us there. And we don't worry about my news hole anymore. You go do that. So it's a constant iterative process. But if you think about it, it's self-correcting. You shouldn't be doing that kind of thing other than save the planet kind of things. You know, you shouldn't be wasting resources chasing things that don't benefit, that wouldn't benefit society at that level. You know, so there's an economy of resources there that really actually works in all of our favor. Does that answer your question?
Because you sent us an article that journalism in government help. It's not just for investigative reporting. I mean, if you do a media, I know because you also do some marketing and some publishing management. If you want to do this media, this part is journalism. Journalism need independent. Also, you should think about how to make money for this media.
It's the article, like, what's wrong with this that you sent us?
Yeah. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with? Okay, let's take the capitalism equation out of journalism and just fund it, government fund it. What's wrong with that?
I couldn't tell if he was advocating for like private and public or all public.
I think it was advocating for all public.
All public? Like BBC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was using BBC and China Xinhua News. It's like, for me, his argument is somewhat compelling because so many newspapers are dying. Yeah. But at the same time, if you are a watchdog group, say for religious freedom, but then someone finds out that you get funding from Iran and Saudi Arabia, where's your credibility? Like, if you can't trust that publication to be critical of the government. I mean, that's the first issue, but he does address that. So I couldn't really figure it out.
He made a provocative argument. That's why it's sent it to. It's not the slammed up. No, we shouldn't do this. It was a provocative argument. This guy's president of Columbia University. My son's going to Columbia Law School. You know, I respect that school. But I think the issue. I think you're absolutely right. It's not a cut and dry issue, but there is something wrong. I mean, I stick with my question. What's wrong with it? Think about. I'm sorry.
Accountability.
Well, yeah. What if?
I attended a Commonwealth lecture, like maybe last year, and they were talking about this issue about how publicly funded journalism, the professor didn't specify a line, but he says there is a certain amount that you have to cut off, because then, you know, if the government's funding you, then who will regulate the government in terms of the money, you know? So there's this kind of conflict of interest we're going to do.
There's a simple way to illustrate it. What if the government decides they don't want to spend the money anymore? You know, what if we? That's an interesting thing, right? What happens then? The BBC works. but the British are pretty sophisticated in terms of their civilization and their journalism, and their particular culture. In their particular culture, it works. I mean, I'm just not that comfortable with asking Barack Obama for money, to publish. I mean, personally, not that comfortable. I don't think our politics of the British, like I said, British very, very sophisticated this way. I mean, yeah. So you ever hear the? I'm not going to tell you that joke. Ever hear the European heaven and European hell joke?
No.
No, I'll tell you off camera. It's not off color, but it's,
well, we can edit it out.
What's the definition of European heaven? The British run the government, the Swiss are the police, the French are the cook, the Italians are the lovers, and the Germans are the engineers. Okay. What's the definition of European hell? The British are the cooks, the Germans are the police, the Swiss run the government, and the Italians are the mechanics, or the engineers. No, the French are the engineers, and the Swiss are the lovers, and the Italians are the run the government. I'm sorry, I messed it all. You get the idea. You get the idea. So you want the British to run the government, and in a sense that's why they do so well with BBC. It's I think it's a cultural marvel. But not necessarily a world paradigm. So I don't think it would work in America, and I don't think it has to work in America. I think America's rich enough to figure this out. It's just going to be ugly before it's better. We are currently in the process. We're past the golden age of journalism. We're in the rapidly tarnishing silver age of journalism, and because of the churn created by the media, because media goes faster now. We're going to tarnish quickly, but we're in the stage of redefining the value of credible journalism, but we're going to redefine it and value it the hard way. Not great news for those of you who aspire to be paid as journalists, by the way. But there is. I mean, don't despair. If God's called you to do this, you will get your opening. But what do you say?
So with like publicly funded journalism, would you say that you're not comfortable with it because there's too much corruption in the government?
I just feel like capitalist influence. The influence. The guy who pays the bills has a lot to say. He just does. He has a right to, frankly. So he can. One of the most terrifying polls I've read in the last 5 years is a poll of high school students at the time. It was a USA Today poll, and more than 65%, I think was the number, is well into the 60s, believed that the government should review all news articles before they're published. This was, I shudder to think how civics is being taught in our nation's high schools, but it was 65% of those polled, thought that it would be, that it was either right to, or it was already happening, that someone reviews news articles, someone in the government reviews news articles before they pass, So I mean, I just don't. They'll all vote someday, So I'm just nervous about it all. I just don't, it just seems tricky to me, especially since the last round of politics here. The whole how healthcare was passed, and this whole lame, the lame duck strategy. You familiar with what I'm describing as the lame duck strategy? There's maybe for you guys who are not inside the belt, those of us inside the belt, we're all shuddering at the concept that the Democrats, even if they get thrashed in November, are just going to come back in a lame duck session and pass all the stuff that they believe the nation should have anyway, because they're getting thrown out anyway, and they know better than the rest of the nation, and this is their last chance, so that they need to do it for our own good. That's a terrifying moment in democracy. It really is. It's a terrifying moment in democracy. I'm just in that kind of thing. I can't walk over to public funding of journalism very easily.